Hey class, welcome back to Ceramics 101 with Miss Terra. Who's ready to get their hands in some clay? I know I am. So now that you understand cones and you've picked the right kind of clay for your project, it's time to just get your hands in there. There's a lot of muscle memory involved when working with clay. And at first it can seem awkward and clumsy as you get to know it and you get to know the way your hands impact it, what it needs to shape in certain ways. And the best way to do that is just to practice. It's just to play with it, test it, push the limits, see what you can get away with. And so for this first project, I want you to kind of keep that in mind, that we're not aiming for a specific result, we're aiming for practice. But these pieces that you're making are going to be used down the road to learn some other things, so definitely don't throw them away. Okay, so today we're going to be making simple pinch bowls. And all you need to do this are your hands and maybe a little bit of water, but mostly your hands. So the first thing I like to do is roll a piece of clay into a perfect-ish ball. And then go ahead and smooth out any big cracks you see or wrinkles on the surface. Now there are as many techniques for making a pinch pot or a pinch bowl as there are people who make them. I'm going to show you the kind that I like to make, or my technique, because it works well for me, but if it doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. You will eventually develop something that feels right for you. So what I do is I take my ball, I take my thumb, and I go ahead, I support it with my other hand, and push down right in the middle until I can feel that I'm a little more than a 1/4 inch from the bottom. And if you poke right through, just roll your clay into a ball and start again. It takes some time to be able to sense the space between your fingers when you're working with clay, and that's just something that comes with a little bit of practice. So the next thing I like to do is just to kind of pinch the bottom a little bit, try to make it kind of even and flat. And again, I'm going for about a 1/4 inch thick. Whoop, I can't even see. I'm going for about a 1/4 inch thickness with this. I don't want it to get much bigger than that, or much thinner than that. Now notice how I have my hands, my fingers on the outside pushing inward, and my thumb on the inside pushing outward. If you just push outward, you're going to end up with a very open bowl. And if that's the shape you're going for, that's great. But I want to show you how to do this with control so that you can create, a cup shape, bowl shape, or like a platter shape, depending on what you're trying to make. So now that my bottom's kind of even, I start working on the sides. And what I do is I just work my thumb and my fingers on the outside in kind of a spiral, moving up the sides of the bowl. And again, most of the pressure is actually coming from my outer fingers, not my thumb. It's just there to offer resistance. So I start ending up with this kind of shape. This, if I keep going like this will become a nice bowl shape. But if I wanted it to be taller, I could take this opportunity to pinch the other way, pulling down this direction to just thin those sides and pull them inwards so that I'm getting more control over the steepness of the sides. Now as you can see, sometimes cracks start to form. They're harder to fix later, so I recommend every now and then just dipping your finger in a little bit of water. You don't need much, you actually want some friction, and just smoothing out those cracks on the inside and the outside. I was lucky enough to take a wonderful workshop, and it was really interesting. One thing we did was we were all working on pinch bowls, and then we would pass them around to each other, and it was really fascinating to notice how some people's hands were just so much warmer that they made the clay dry out a lot faster and they were struggling with cracking, whereas other people's hands are colder and seemed kind of wetter, and so the clay was a little more manageable. So just keep that in mind, that if yours doesn't immediately look like mine, maybe your hands are warmer than mine. Very likely I have very cold hands. Anyways, let me just get these outside cracks. So as you can see, I've started a little bowl, and you want to make sure that the way you're working it is even. Don't just poke here and poke there. Make sure you're working in a gentle circle, and you just are doing a little bit at a time. You don't need to just muscle it into a bowl right off the bat. In fact, that's a really good way to get a really wonky thing. So once I've done kind of the base, I continue that spiral up the sides. Again, I can switch and pull inwards if I want steeper sides, or I can push more with my thumb if I want it to be kind of more open shaped. I always do the lip last because it does have a tendency to flare out. And if you're making something bigger than this little cup or little bowl I'm making, sometimes you have to stop and let the clay harden on the bottom a little bit before you keep going. It should still be malleable and everything, but it might be too floppy. And in the next video, I'll be talking about the different stages of clay, but for now, we're just starting with little bowls, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Okay, so you just pinch the upper edge. Again, being as even and gentle as you can. You might have to go around a couple of times. And this creates a very even-walled bowl. And then I go in and I feel around for any spots that seem a little bit thicker than others and just give them a little pinch. It's all about being fairly delicate. With this sized piece of clay, especially with porcelain, delicacy is key. And then I take some water, I smooth out the lips and any cracks on the outside, making sure I really, work them so they're not going to come back later. One thing I sometimes do when I'm working on the lip at the end is I just very gently go around and kind of pinch and squeeze it. And what that does is it thins out the lip while keeping it contained into a nice circular shape. And then ta-da, you have your first little pinch bowl. So you can set that aside to dry. Normally I'd have you cover it with plastic, but because it's so even and there aren't any attachments, it should be fine just drying out in the air. Just flip it over a couple times a day and wait until it's completely dry before you fire it. Alright, I'm gonna make one more and go pretty fast. You can watch my hands. I just want to show you ways that you can get different shapes. So with this one, I'm really pushing in with my outer fingers. This is after I've already thinned the bottom a little bit. So I really was pushing in with my outer fingers. Then sometimes I like to kind of gently squeeze it in a circle. And continue with moving around evenly, kind of pulling up when I squeeze so that it's raising the sides of that form. And this is how I make a lot of my mugs and my cups. Is just using this technique. So while you're making yours, just experiment with holding it in different ways, pinching it in different ways. At this point, I've made so many pinch cups that it's fairly mindless for me, which is great. I love working on them while I'm posting lives over on TikTok, or watching a movie, or listening to music, or even hanging out with friends when it's not a pandemic. Okay, so now I'm just going through and I'm just looking for those thick spots to thin them out. Pretty happy with my shape. And then when I do the top, I do the same thing. I first want to really smooth it out. And as you can see, I'm going a lot faster just because I am explaining less and because this is the pace that I work at now. Your pace will probably be slower. It's better to start slow and get the practice right than to dive in and go too fast and have things kind of go out of control. So then I'm just pushing upwards and inwards again. I set it down sometimes to do that pushing in trick that I showed you. Sometimes I like to actually kind of fold it in or push it in on the outside with my fingers, trying to get a nice tall bowl shape. And I'll be talking about ways that you can use these forms later on. But for now, this is your chance to get used to your clay. Get to know it, get to see what its personality is like, or what it feels like to try to pinch it one way versus the other. Or versus another. There's a lot of ways to pinch it. There. Now you can see that this bowl is a lot more raised than our first bowl. It's a lot taller. And that's just in different angles of my fingers moving. That's it. So just some things to keep in mind. Practice. See if you can set out and say, I'm going to make a taller bowl and make a taller bowl. Or I'm going to make a really shallow dish and make a really shallow dish. At first, it might be frustrating. It might not turn out how you want it to. It just takes time for your hands to learn that muscle memory and for you to understand the way that force should be applied to get the shape you want. So that's it for today. Once again, remember that this is a tip-funded free program. So if you're able to send me some digital tips, here are the places you can do that. You can pause if you need to look at them closer. And next time we'll be back for understanding the different stages of clay throughout the creation, drawing, firing process. So see you next time. Bye.